All right, I'm apologizing for Dr. Hanson. He's unable to make the seminar, so I am going to open in prayer. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for this medium that we are able to gather and disseminate information in various spheres. Lord, I pray that today it will be very informative and applicable to our different situations or different sections that we work in. And I pray that we will also have fun and be entertained. Please take control of the program. In your precious name we pray, amen.
Amen.
All right, so now we'll have our first presenter. He comes highly qualified in coaching swimming on various levels. He has completed 2 FINA referee clinics, has his official open water certification and a level 1 certifications in level 1 and 2 ultra short race pace training, and in level 2 FINA coaching. He has represented our talented country, Jamaica, in Bahamas for Carifta in 2017 as the national head coach for the team. He has also coached swimmers who represented Jamaica at CC-CAN and various international stages. He has been the head coach of Kaizen Swim Club since 2017. And a fun fact, despite him being a coach for tank swimming, he prefers salt water and loves swimming at the beach. Please welcome Coach Rory Alvarenga, who will be sharing with us on swimming biomechanics.
Good evening. Audio getting out correct?
It's ready, loud and clear, sir.
All right, thank you, thank you. Good evening, panelists. Good evening, guests. As Jody said, I've been around the block a little bit. And yes, so, when she asked me about cross training, I was a little bit, okay, let's see where this is gonna go, until she said swimming biomechanics, which then brought a smile on my face. Am I sharing?
Yes, we're able to see.
Yes.
All right, let me small up some of it, just blocking out some of my words. All right, I was given the topic swimming biomechanics up to, several years ago when I was doing cricket and swimming at school. We couldn't find the word biomechanics in the dictionary, but it is very prevalent today, and biomechanics and swimming go hand in hand, especially that we are not created for the water, but trying to adapt there. We have no web hands, gills, or no such thing, and the excessive repetitive overhead movement necessitate that we use the best mechanics, biomechanics in swimming, first and foremost for the performance that we seek, and secondary to reduce risk of injury. Okay, so biomechanics and swimming, sports biomechanics, for those not au fait, the application of physics and mechanics to the human body during sports. This will enable us to get the best out of our performance. In such a technical sports as swimming, it plays a very important role in competitive swimming preparation and is an important part of maximizing performance. I am hasten to add also injury prevention, because that's one of the primary thing of mine when a swimmer or an athlete to finish injury-free. You want to celebrate that, then you look to the other areas. The physics part of it, you'll see they have graphs and everything in depicting the best biomechanics. There are several biomechanical variables determining the competitive swimmer's performance. For example, the kinematic variables like stroke length, stroke frequency, speed fluctuation, limb kinematic, kinetic variables, propulsion drag, lift drag, drag force, and neuromuscular variables. For those not into the sciences, kinematic is a science of describing motion of objects. Using numbers, graphs, equation, they do the scientific work, words, to depict what is best for the action that you want to be carried out. It's a branch of mechanics, they say. And for those that study kinematic, the goal is to develop sophisticated mental model that serves to describe what the motion of the real world object would come out to be. Competitive swimming consists of 4 strokes and utilizes both the upper and the lower extremities in moving forward through the water. Ultimate goal is to get to the end line, as in other sports, movement sports, speed sports, first. Shoulder and arm mechanics are similar for 3 of the strokes, the freestyle, the butterfly, and the backstroke. Much of the forward propulsion, some schools says up to 80% of the forward propulsion come through the upper arm, the stroke. The pull-through phase of these stroke is a result of lift force produced by the transverse motion of the hand and the forearm. We, however, as coaches, we try to minimize the lift force in lieu of forward propulsion. It is there, and because of the overhead action, when you first enter, you will get some lift force. Shoulder abduction, and someone will speak to the main injuries of swimming, which we know come out of the shoulder. Shoulder abduction and internal rotation are important in stabilizing the shoulder and allowing the body to move forward over the hand during the swim stroke. The same is true of the rapid movement and the portion of the breaststroke. The pull-through phase, a lot of people in breaststroke, without the proper mechanics, they don't move on the pull phase, they only move on the kicking phase. Similarly, we talk about the upper and the lower extremities. Similarly, the flutter kick or the dolphin kick used in freestyle backstroke and butterfly produces some motion by creating forward lift. And the lower leg paddles the flutter kick, the fluttering against the resistance of the water. Knee motion plays a part in there. Some people kicking anywhere from between 0, a straight leg kick, not desired, up to a 90-degree bend in the knee. The breaststroke, on the other hand, which gets most of its propulsion from the kick, it moves the water, whip the water out from between the leg, the backward motion, and the rapid closing of the legs. These are where the adductors come into play a lot of times and are strained if not conditioned properly. Flexion of this leg action goes up to 140 degrees for the breaststroke. So all these forces are meant to overcome drag in the water and get you through. But these comes at an expense to the body and the joints and the whole workings of the human body, upper and lower, which is the force-resistant forward movement. It is hoped that at the same time in the near future, that determinant from drag will be measurable and correctable, therefore leading to more effective and faster swimming. And we look forward to that as we move forward as a federation in Jamaica, because we're seeing swimming getting faster and faster. There was a time when, after they had the plastic type racing suit, which was eventually banned during a lot of world records being broken, it took a long time for those world records to be broken until the addition of the biomechanics, the scientific aspect of swimming that came in. And we also saw less injury. One document I read pointed out. I choose not to stay too long. I choose freestyle because freestyle has the most repetitive overhead action, which causes a lot of injury if not done properly. And we find a lot of faults and flaws even in elite swimmers, if you look at them at slow motion, you can find biomechanical flaws. In general, freestyle stroke uses the bone, the muscles, and the shoulder girdle, the clavicles, scapulars, and arm, humerus, radius, the ulna. Most of the movement of the freestyle strokes are also involved in the glenohumeral joint and the ulnohumeral joint and the radial ulnar joint. I tried to depict some of that there. For those who do not in the field of medicine, one looks and see the ulna and wonder what that have to do with swimming, but trust me, they all play something in it. We have the distal bicep tendonitis and all the other stuff associated with those areas. If not done properly, especially the catch phase overemphasizing. So no matter the skill level, age group, national, elite, Olympic, freestyle is the most commonly performed stroke and has the most injury. In this how to swim piece here that I'm trying to depict the biomechanic, we will take a step-by-step approach, allowing you to deliberately look at the importance and the necessity of each elite performer and why biomechanics, as I was asked to present on, is so important. One thing about deliberate practice is that you strive for continual improvement, and this must be strived for if the change behavior of biomechanics must continue, because it can easily be changed as muscles get stronger, bones grow and stuff. In swimming, this means working continuously on your biomechanics. I have here different charts. This is for the freestyle. It shows you the more dominant muscles of freestyle. So when one specializes, these are areas of emphasis, and other areas, as Diallo would hasten to say, it's the entire body, but different strokes have different working muscles, and working all of them will produce, what's that word, Doc? Human horsepower, better human horsepower, because everything works in tandem with each other. In breathing in freestyle, the head turns independent of the shoulder, and we find a lot of swimmers don't do this properly. Rotating the entire body will result in excessive rotation, and this too has to be controlled. Breathing out explosively as the head starts to turn to the side of the horizontal axis, explosive breathing. This allows for the rapid inhalation and the quick head return. This quick head return, believe it or not, for most, they don't see it as anything, but you can see here these muscles that we oftentimes, Doc and others will have to treat in their practice. It is desirable that only one goggle is exposed during the breathing, but we don't always get that down. But once the breath is quick, it will disrupt streamline minimally. Breathing is fast, and the rapid turning of the head left and right oftentimes results in injury, if not stretch and warm up properly. The time for the turning action of the arm, that is when the propulsion ends. If you turn your head as the arm is propelling, the amount of force during the pull will theoretically be distributed to breathing, as well as overall decrease your performance. So this is why we have to do that action quick and get the swimmer back to looking at the bottom of the pool. This is on breathing again. Postural line between the swimmer's head, shoulder, and hips should be firm at all times throughout the stroke, as this is one of the long axis stroke, and it adds a lot of drag when you are not in this postural streamlined position. The body roll. These all come together with the consists of the hip and the shoulder rotating up to 45 degrees. Other schools say 42 degrees to both sides during the swim when not breathing. However, some swimmers only rotate when they are breathing, and this puts extra stress on the neck. This reduces the frontal resistance and position of propulsive arm closer to the midline. That's the midline of the body. The harder the swimmer kicks, the greater is the amount of resistance that is developed. And it's more splashing, bigger than you need to be. Kicking should remain small and fast, and deviation to each side in concert with the body roll and of the hip and the shoulder. Here we have the sideway kicking, the over the head extension, the shoulder is almost at ear level forward, and the latissimus dorsi right here is fully ready for firing, the elbows back, the whole arm back, correction. Body rolling freestyle, a high elbow recovery will facilitate a good body roll. We see a lot of swimmers with the straight arm recovery. It's not the best action for the joint itself, but some get away with it. How they're conditioned and prepare for it will determine the rate of injury. And you do see less straight arm swimmers into the final than you do see bent arm recovery. In the middle of the propulsive phase of the freestyle, in line from the recovering elbow through the shoulder joint to the propelling arm, the elbow should be straight. Reach fully over the water, entering fingering with a flat hands out in front of, not inside your shoulder. It must be at or outside shoulder. The shoulder should be fully extended forward in getting the best out of your propulsive force. The shoulder and the upper arm should remain extended while the body rotates to the lower, to lower the shoulder into the water. Am I going over anybody else? Doc, check the chat for me, please. Oh.
No, you're fine. We'll take questions when you finish.
Okay. Well, what did I do? It's not changing. Okay. Here's where a lot of problem with the biomechanics take place. Once the shoulder is fully extended, the upper arm should internally rotate while the elbow flexes the position to get the forearm vertical into the early catch position. Without a good, stable scapula, the whole rotator cuff chain, this is where slip elbows and all the other stuff come in there. Abduction of the upper arm commence as part for the continuous acceleration motion. And what I teach is that you focus on pulling the elbow back. That way we get to recruit the lats. A lot of swimmers do is not recruit the lats and thereby overexerting the shoulder joint to get the elbow to move back, the hands to move back, correction. This part of the stroke should feel increasingly faster and stronger. When done properly, medially rotating the shoulder joint, dropping the fingertips, firing the lats, and getting the pull of the elbow back rather than the shoulder. As I mentioned, the forearm and the hand rotate to the vertical, while the upper arm medially rotates and remain stretched forward. As the upper arm abduct, the shoulder and the hip should be rotating to the other side. That way you're not putting too much stress on the neck and the whole propulsive arm. The arm will be deep and come towards, as you rotate, it comes back towards the end of stroke, preparing for the other arm action to repeat the same thing. Here we have a picture. And an early catch is not early if the elbow is not out in front of the head. This is how you maximize your stroke length. And while you're here, this is where the clavicle is in danger and all the other stuff. Repetitive training often affects the shoulder joint when not done properly. Here we have another early depiction of early catch. This is the actual initial phase where the scapulas are medially rotating the shoulder to get the fingertip down. Here you go again. Once the elbow has abducted to the side where it can no longer add any propulsion, it is now the forearm that takes over. This part of the stroke should feel the strongest and the fastest of the whole total arm movement. It marks the end of propulsive acceleration. The abducted elbow should be far back as possible alongside the swimmer's body. The forearm and the hand should be vertical and pass directly, directly backward. This is the fastest part of the arm action. The next movement after achieving the arm end position should be the elbow raise out of the water. We see a lot of persons without the proper technique raising the hand, having the hand, the actual hand higher than the elbow. This should not be so. Think of raising the elbow and keeping the wrist below the elbow in a bent arm recovery. Not that shark fin fingertip drag type of a stroke, but a bent arm with the wrist below the elbow. It lessens the stress and the counterbalancing force that the swimmer has to work against in the shoulder joint and the entire drag against the body. The hand and the forearm should round out as they exit the water. It's a natural movement if you end with your palm facing back and the end of the stroke and basically just raising the elbow, initiating the bent arm recovery. Here we have the classic high elbow recovery, but note how the shoulder is higher than the propulsive shoulder. That's the roll that we talk about. And the eyes should be looking down. Time the recovery with the propulsive arm action. Fully enter fully forward, flat hand, fingertip first in front of a wider than shoulder width. We do have swimmers that enter inside the shoulder for butterfly, backstroke, freestyle, and this is where the impingement take place. Not what we want in swimming biomechanics. Once you adhere to the biomechanics of at or outside shoulder width, you're more at the best position for propulsion and less for injury. Here we have the classic freestyle recovering arms, the two recovering styles. Note the gray area below the bottom. The counterbalancing force, this comes from your hip and your kick, lessening the amount of propulsion you want. So you want to avoid that wide arm recovery as much as possible, which places more stress on the shoulder joint. It's like a balance beam, it's like a scale. Having the weight closer versus being wide, you have a larger gradient on the scale for the same amount of movement if the arm was closer. We spoke about the lower extremities. Kicking should be small and fast. The effort of kicking should match that of the arm stroke. We have kickers who kick and their quads getting tired more than their glutes and the hips because of improper kicking action. Very little knee bend. It should be almost splashless. You see the water bubbling. Kick consistently. Some side-to-side rotation occur of the kicking action because of the body roll. We spoke about physics, bringing physics. Here is the best body position, streamlined. The red shows the area of resistance that will act on your body. The yellow, the resistance gets less, and the green. If you look at the heel, imagine if this guy wasn't pointing his toe and had his foot down, you would probably have some red area on that. On top of the nose bridge, you have red. This is how resistance, the water acts on your body in swimming. Backstroke, extending beyond the head as you do in freestyle. As we said that the arm action of backstroke, butterfly, and freestyle are similar. Natural head position and the body rolls similarly as it does in freestyle. Here we have the dominant muscles of backstroke. We never saw much of these muscles in freestyle, and we never saw these in freestyle, but for the next presenter, these are where we have a lot of problems. These are the dominant muscles of backstroke. The head position here is not proper, and that's where we get a lot of neck injury. Here is the rotating body and the bent elbow behind the head for greater stroke length. Michael Phelps, the classic overhead bent arm recovery, extending forward, looking directly at the bottom of the pool. Natural head position should be attained at all times, with the exception of when you are breathing. We have that early catch, sideway kicking, breaststroke, a different set of muscles that become dominant. A key point of breaststroke is that the knees, while we see a lot of it outside of the shoulder, should not extend outside the shoulder. This is where we get a lot of the knee injuries from. The breaststroke kick, the knees should be a quick pull off the heels with the knees approximately shoulder width apart, with the thigh angled down in front of you, not to the side. You pull the heels up to the butt, turn the feet out, attempt to grab the water with the inside of your, the tibia, the shin bone and the inside of your foot, whip the kick backward, not down, as is commonly seen in younger breaststrokers, backward for the forward propulsion. The knees outside of the shoulder, a recipe for disaster. And for the coveted butterfly, another setup, well, similar, but we see the other areas that come into play. I can share the pictures also on the slide afterward for persons desiring to have it. A classic early catch. The extension of the lats outside of the shoulder. This is getting the forearm vertical to grab more water. This is how you climb out of the pool. I mean, without thinking about it, a child climb out of the pool like this because the brain says this is how you do it. This is how you use the lats to pull out. This is how you're going to get that heavy body out of the pool. And we use that in our biomechanics also for butterfly and freestyle. Michael Phelps, breathing low, keeping low. My own imitating the great one. The end.
All right. Thank you, Coach Alvaranga, for that lovely, informative presentation on swimming biomechanics. I'm sure even some of us who think we can swim have learned a lot about our techniques. We're going to hold the questions until the end of Mrs. Brown's presentation. And I just want, before I introduce her, I just want to remind you, for those who are not members, the process of getting CMEs, once you make the payment, you will send the proof of payment to jamaicasportsmed@gmail.com and copy JASM education@gmail.com. The cost is $1,000 for the 3 CMEs, and that's for non-members. All right, so our next presenter, Mrs. Heron Patterson Brown, has been doing what she loves and has been loving what she does for over 30 years as a physiotherapist. She received her diploma in physiotherapy at the University of the West Indies School of Physical Therapy in 1991 and her BSc in physical therapy in 2010. She holds a postgraduate certificate in geriatric care management from the University of Florida. She is an American Breast Cancer Certified Post-Mastectomy Bra Fitter, a certified kinesio-taping instructor since 2011, and a member of the research committee of Kinesio-Taping Association International. She revels in the transformative impact of the kinesio-taping method in the lives of many individuals. She recently completed the IOC Diploma in Sports Therapies in 2021 and the IOC Certificate in Mental Health in Elite Sports in 2022. As founder and CEO of Therapeutic Touch, Mrs. Brown has the distinct pleasure of activating her passion daily. She has served at Spanish Town Hospital during the period of 1993 to 95, and was the head of the PT department at Maypen Hospital and acting head of department at Mandeville Regional Hospital during 2011 to 2015. Mrs. Brown is a member, an active member of the Jamaica Association of Sports Medicine, currently the treasurer, and she has served as president of the central chapter of the Jamaica Association of Sports Medicine from 2017 to 2019, and has represented team physiotherapy for both Jamaica national junior and senior track and field teams at several regional and international events for Carifta Games to Summer Olympics. A dedicated member of the Jamaica Physiotherapy Association, she has served as president from 2013 to 2015. She enjoys reading, traveling, and gives service to her parish through the Lions Club of Clarendon, which she is currently the president. Let's welcome Mrs. Brown, who is going to present on injuries in swimming and the management.
Good afternoon, everyone. One correction, I am the immediate past president of the Lions Club of Clarendon in 2023. Thanks for inviting me to present this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here. I am happy to see the persons in our audience. And my topic today is going to be injuries in swimming and management. The objectives of my presentation: we're going to just do a brief revision of the swim strokes as outlined by our presenter. So we just skim over. We're going to be looking at the physical requirements of swimming, ranges of motion needed in swimming, the kinetic chain, an outline of technical errors in swimming, and then we jump right into injuries, describing the swimmer's shoulder and its management, to an overview of common injuries in swimming and their management, and a case review. So, as indicated, there are several strokes in swimming: freestyle, butterfly, and we have, of course, the backstroke and breaststroke. In freestyle, it requires a combination of motion of scapular retraction and elevation, along with humeral abduction and external rotation. We have to take note that the power achieved through our shoulder adductors, extensors, internal rotators, along with serratus and the lats, are the key propulsive muscles for swimmers. And during this stroke, because the body rotates away from the side that is beginning to pull, the shoulder avoids an actual impingement position in this stroke. In the butterfly, there is similar motion at the shoulder, like the freestyle, but much of the propulsion during butterfly comes from the hip and trunk. So any insufficiency or weakness in the lower extremities will increase stress on the shoulders in swimming. For the breaststroke, it's opposite to the freestyle stroke. Shoulder is in retraction. You need horizontal abduction and external rotation at hand entry and beginning of pull through. And this position places increased stress on the anterior capsule of the shoulder. In recovery, the elbow is extended rather than flexed. And Mr. Alvaranga talked about the height of the elbow and elbow flexion. Due to trunk rotation, the swimmer is rarely flat on the back during this movement and spends most time on his or her side. For the breaststroke, movement at the shoulder may vary and more motion occur below the surface of the water than any other stroke, right? The arms move simultaneously through the motion for pull, and the elbows remain flexed during pull through until the humerus is fully adapted and brought into horizontal adduction. We must note that unlike other strokes, the hands never move below the hip. So the force is on the rotator cuff during other stroke at the end of pull through does not occur during breaststroke. I am putting up a case study question, and I want you to be thinking and making notes as we go along, because we will discuss this question at the end of my presentation. So if a breaststroke swimmer presents with a complaint of medial knee pain, what is the most likely diagnosis? When you go through your assessment and you have come up with the possible explanations, what would your strategy be to address this? So I'll give you a few moments to write it down, write the question down, and we will get back to this at the end of the presentation. Have you got it? I hope so. Next slide. So what ranges of motion are needed for swimmers? When we look at the upper extremity, we need shoulder flexion. Shoulder abduction should be 150 to 170 degrees. You need greater than 45 degrees internal rotation. External rotation, research has it up 95 to 105 degrees. Shoulder extension and thoracic extension is key. So you're looking at 5 to 15 degrees. And thoracic rotation, you should have greater than 70 degrees of motion available. There is what we call a combined elevation test, and that is a combination of how much shoulder extension and thoracic extension you should get, and that is between 5 and 15 degrees. In the lower extremity, you need greater than 10 degrees hip extension, greater than 45 degrees internal rotation. You need greater than 45 degrees tibial external rotation, and you need greater than 160 degrees plantar flexion. So these are some ranges that you need to bear in mind when you're evaluating or assessing range of motion in swimmers. So let's have a look at the kinetic chain in swimming. Now, the kinetic chain is what allows the generation, transfer, and regulation of forces linking the leg and the hand. And failure in either the upper extremity or the lower extremity link can result in failure of the other. One can result in failure of the other. If we look at our propulsive phase, we are looking from pull phase, push phase, and we are looking at hands forward, backwards motion, translating into a hands forward movement. The muscles involved also key, so you have to look at these in your assessment. The muscles involved in early recovery, posterior deltoid, middle deltoid, rhomboids. Mid recovery, middle deltoids, upper traps, serratus anterior, infraspinatus. Late recovery, we're looking at middle deltoid, anterior deltoid, serratus, your rhomboid, subscapularis. During the glide and reach phase, anterior and middle deltoids, your upper traps, your rhomboids. Early pull through, your pecs, teres minor, mid pull through, serratus anterior, pec major, lats. Late pull through, your lat dorsi, subscapularis, and end pulling, your subscapularis, posterior and middle deltoids, and supraspinatus. Very important in your assessment to go through and actually muscle test and examine these muscles. Again, the kinetic order of muscle engagement, pull up versus the swim catch. The picture on the right, muscles that are engaged in the pull up, and on the left, oh sorry, my left, your right, left, pull up, right, swim catch. And you can see those muscles in the upper extremity. Order of engagement, lower extremity, in running, back leg, hamstrings, glutes, your calf muscles. At the front of the leg, you have your quads and your calf. Flutter kick or a back kick, your glutes engage, your hamstrings, your calf. Forward kick, quads, and calf. So each coach has their own idea of perfect technique. Technique is the domain of the coach. But is any technique really perfect? That is between you and the coach to discuss. Any suggestion or changes that must be made must be discussed with and initiated by the coach of swimmers. Again, the coach is in charge. Technique is their forte, okay? Technical errors that were mentioned, dropped elbow, crossing the midline, overreaching on hand entry, late breathing, late external rotation during recovery, lack of thoracic rotation, poor timing associated with hip rotation. Again, you should spend some time at training, at practice. Once you get a swimmer that is going to present with any injury, you want to attend their training session. You want to attend their competition. You want to keep the dialogue open with their coaches. So here are some risk factors for shoulder pain in swimming. And shoulder pain is a very common, complaint in swimmers. There is significant evidence that shoulder internal and external rotation are risk factors for shoulder pain in swimmers. Laxity and instability at the shoulder joint, previous history of shoulder pain, competition level. So we're looking at our young athletes that are not competing. We're looking at swimmers that compete just on a level below the elite athlete status, right? Researches have been done, and those 4 bullets above show that there is only moderate level of certainty with these studies. The evidence suggests that joint laxity and instability are risk factors, but the quality of studies that were done are the constraining factors. Competition level, 3 studies were found that supported an increased incidence of pain in elite competitive swimmers versus recreational swimmers. And this was confirmed using MRI studies. Other factors have a very low level of certainty. So age, sex, flexibility, scapular kinematics, the breathing side, your training load, your history of the activities that you do, cross-training. As a matter of fact, there are 4 studies that were examined, examining cross-training and stretching and their relationship to pain in swimmers. 2 found an association, 2 found none. Hill et al. In 2015 concluded that there was indeed insufficient evidence to associate with shoulder pain. We're now going to look at swimmer's shoulder. At first, I was surprised that this was the actual name of the major injury in swimming, right? So it's a musculoskeletal condition with pain symptoms on the anterior lateral aspect of the shoulder, just in the area of the subacromial region. Holt et al. Argues that given the intimate anatomical relationship of the supraspinatus, the long head of biceps, and its pulleys and subscapularis tendon, repeated articular side contact of all these structures are likely during elevation and internal rotation. And you find mostly the elite athlete swimmers are able to achieve this, but it is the anterior superior internal impingement that has the potential to drive changes across the entire rotator cuff and the interval. Internal impingement plays a greater role in the etiology of swimmer's shoulder than the mechanisms associated with external impingement and or external rotation. What are the signs and symptoms? Again, symptoms: progressive pain, dead arm feeling of instability at the shoulder, pain at rest and at night, pain that prevents participation. The signs: you'll see an alteration in their strokes or their ability to swim, altered arc of movement, reduced arc of range of motion, weakness in the supraspinatus and infraspinatus. You're looking at weakness in the scapulothoracic stabilizing muscle, increased shoulder elasticity, multidirectional instability, trunk and abdominal core stability deficits. Incidence: in comparison to various sports and the stresses placed on the shoulder, Johnston et al. Provided a very interesting comparison when it came on to the incidence and prevalences. They reported that professional golfers usually has approximately 200 revolutions per shoulder in 1 week. They looked at javelin throwing and noted that college javelin throwers had approximately 300 revolutions in a week. Baseball pitchers, throw approximately 1,000 pitches involving shoulder revolutions per week. Professional tennis players, again, 1,000 shoulder revolutions in a week. But look at the swimmers. They're saying approximately 16,000 to 20,000 shoulder revolutions per week when they added up both training or competition throughout the year. So take their 52 weeks in a year, add this up, people, and you'll see that indeed shoulder pain, the prevalence of shoulder pain is something to investigate and speak about. And of course, we'll have our hands full trying to treat this. So prevalence of shoulder pain in competitive swimmers, Holt et al. Gave swimmers reporting 53% history of and up to 77% during their careers. This is amazing. Physios who treat swimmers, hats off to you, or this is something for other physios to get into if they're really interested in the management of shoulder pain in athletes. George Davis et al., The Shoulder in Swimming, a really interesting read. And if you get the chance, George Davis is professor at, I think, is it Atlanta, Diallo?
Georgia Southern.
Georgia State, isn't it?
The Georgia Southern.
I had the pleasure of meeting Prof. Davis, but they have done some remarkable work in terms of looking at shoulder pain in swimmers. And they outlined the possible mechanisms of shoulder pain in swimmers. So when it comes on to management now, PTs who treat competitive swimmers should focus on prevention, yes. If not, early treatment, address associated impairments, analyze early, look at their training methods, look at their stroke mechanisms. You must go to the pool or wherever they're training to have a look so that you can, it will help with your diagnosis. So we want to reduce training distance and frequency. We want to alter training patterns. We want to ensure different strokes are being used more frequently throughout practice. This alteration will reduce the repetitive pattern and stresses on the glenohumeral joint and allow the muscles to function differently. A little bit of cross training comes in here. When we look at, we want to tailor our rehab program, right? We want to strengthen the rotator cuff and scapular stabilizers. We want to modify activity. Looking at modalities, we are looking at doing our soft tissue releases. We want to mobilize the thoracic spine into extension. You have to teach your athletes self-massage, the external rotators, get them to invest in rollers, foam rollers. They can do thoracic rolling, the dome or arch stretches. That's important. For those of you who dry needle, you can try dry needle in the lats, the pecs, posterior deltoids, whatever you come up with in your assessment. Definitely joint moves to the thoracic spine. You're looking at your hip flexor stretch, your sleeper stretch, right? And you take your time and go through, of course, assessing, analyzing, and then tailoring a rehabilitation program. We'll have a little look at instability at the shoulder. And according to Belling et al. 2000, any structural or functional deficit leading to pathological motion in the shoulder joint, causing pathological translation of the humeral head or excessive rotation of the glenohumeral joint. That is what we are considering as instability. Anterior inferior laxity of the capsular ligamentous structures are associated with instability. This leads to secondary impingement. Holt et al. In 2015 suggests that it leads to anterior superior internal impingement, and of course leads to potential injury of other tissues such as labral tears. Right? How do we manage? We want to include proprioceptive exercises, rotator strength, cuff strengthening, your internal rotators as much as your external rotators. Include pulling and pushing exercises. Address weaknesses on the contralateral side, you want your wand exercises, your weighted ball exercises, wall press, press up on wobble board. Tailor your exercise program, and all these will help the athlete. When it comes on to scapular control, a lot of research, a lot of information is out there looking at scapular dyskinesis, and they found it can be induced by training. There's, however, uncertainty whether this is a primary cause or secondary cause of pain. Yes. And there are EMG studies out there, MRI studies. So the research is there. How do we manage? We manage by engaging progressive scapular exercises. For stability, we want to facilitate contraction of the scapular muscles. You're looking at mobility upon stability. You want to isolate movement on a stable base. You look at stability through the range. So you stabilize through the full range of motion of the shoulder, and you get them exercising through the range. Loaded mobility upon stability. So resistance throughout the range. You want to add these exercises. Here is a brief picture again of some of the exercises that you can do. I hope you can see them. They are small, but yes, you can. 2A, stability. 2B, your thoracic rotation. You're using the weighted ball. You're taking the hand through the full range. You're pressing up wobble board, either at the leg, pressing up wobble board under the hands. Great exercises. You have your TheraBand or elastic resistance that you can do. The shoulder IR at 65 degrees with the wand. That piece of equipment is really nice. It's a flexible one, so it wobbles when you're doing your proprioception exercises and loading. Loading, some people might argue that it is associated with shoulder pain. And when I speak of load, I'm talking about the intensity and the volume of training or competing. However, there's low evidence of the association with shoulder pain. Changes in workload, example, tapering or resting the swimmers. These have been explored and have been associated with shoulder pain. Training errors, right? There is a claim that consistent training is protective of the shoulder. So again, that's in the purview of the coach. Liaise with the coach in terms of managing load. Look at training sessions. Minimize use of paddles, band pulls, or drag suit. Fins, yes, you can use fins. The pulley buoy, yes. Kicks in training without the kickboard. Modify the dry land training sessions and what is being done there. And this should help with minimizing your load or managing the load that swimmers have to go through for the year. Currently, it's generally accepted that tendinopathy develops with excessive stress. And these stresses usually exceed the healing capacity of the tendon cells or tenocytes. And this causes the tendon not to repair properly. So you get chronic loading, the tenocytes rounding, and there's proliferation. There's increased proteoglycans, collagen separation, and thickening of the tendon as the fibers become disorganized. With this thickening, you can get impingement, pain, and tendon degeneration. And this further adds to the amount of pain that is the swimmers are experiencing at the shoulder. How do we manage? Again, you look at your pain modalities, the ultrasound, the cryotherapy, TENS, extracorporeal shockwave therapy. We want to increase ranges of motion, scapula, GH, your thoracic spine. We want to strengthen the rotator cuff muscles. Pay attention to the stabilizers. Okay, remember it's important to use these methods as an adjunct to physical therapy. So you want to do your hands-on, and you must get your exercise programs in place. Self-mobilization and some stretching, that picture. Swimmers also experience low back pain because swimmers spend extensive periods in extension and rotation. So if there's lack of core control, if their hip flexors are tight, they have restricted range of motion at the lower extremities, if there's poor mechanisms or technique, if their gluteal strength or activation is decreased or impaired, it's not firing up, this can lead to low back pain. You're looking at tight hamstrings as well, and how it adds to low back pain. Again, management, patient education, your exercise program, your core strengthening, your squatting, look at dry land training, address the areas of restriction, moves, soft tissue moves, manual therapy, address core control, what exercises you're going to add in, your Superman stretch, your water walking, your pull trail, pull plank, cat-cow stretch, your cobra stretch. These are just some exercises that you can do. Then, of course, we have knee and groin injuries, usually associated with the breaststroke, because there is restriction in hip and ankle. There's muscle imbalance, your core, your back, front of the leg, back of the leg, front of the shoulder, mid area, posterior aspect of the shoulder, your scapular muscles, the rhomboids. There's poor mechanics in the technique. There's poor timing. Yeah. When we think of poor timing, we're probably looking at wide kick and extension, adduction phase of the breaststroke. These are some of the things that lead to knee and groin injuries. And we manage, of course, you want to decrease breaststroke training. You want to look at technique correction, arm, leg coordination, avoid exercises that put a valgus stress on the knee. You want to look at your exercises for hip rotators, adductors, abductors. You want to optimize the loading capacity at the knee. You want to look at your ligaments at the knee, intra-articular pathologies. So you're looking at medial collateral, lateral collateral to a lesser extent. You want to look at valgus deformity, Q angle of the knee of these swimmers, right? And you go through. There are other pathologies that, of course, we look at the joint above and the joint below. when it comes to the lower extremity, we looked at the L spine, we looked at the thigh, we looked at the knee, we looked at the ankle. At the shoulder, we want to look at cervical spine related issues, thoracic outlet syndrome, what's happening at the AC joint. Do these swimmers already are they predisposed to labral tears? You want to look at the viscera. Is this pain, shoulder pain coming from the viscera? You know, if there's some reference. So a detailed assessment is important when you're treating swimmers, when you're looking at both the upper and lower extremities. If we look back now at our case study and the question again was if a swimmer came to you with complaint of knee pain on the medial aspect of the knee, what will we look for? I don't know if you wrote anything down, but let's begin with biomechanics. So we look at the knee. We know that the medial knee undergoes high load at breaststroke during the thrust phase. There is knee flexion, external rotation with hip flexion and internal rotation. We want to look at that. We want to look at valgus loading throughout leg thrust. And we might come up with medial collateral ligament strain or overuse. When we check intrinsic factors now or check for technical flaws, we're looking at valgus alignment, effective arm and leg coordination. The person might have an increased angle of abduction at the hips, associated also with, you know, the width, the wideness of the pelvis. There may be some asymmetry of the hip internal rotators or the tibial external rotators. And there, of course, you want to look at the amount and the intensity of training. Did anyone come up with those possible explanations for the breaststroke swimmer having knee pains? I hope you did get a few, if not all. So how do we solve this or try to solve this? Again, we're looking at training modification. We're looking at decreasing breaststroke training. Remember, I said that you have to mix the strokes during any training session. You're looking at technique correction. So the coach will have to go through and correct these techniques in both dry land and exercises in the water, even though being in the water there's buoyancy. You want to avoid exercise that places valgus stress on the knee. You want to optimize hip rotation. So you're looking at balance, hip to ankle ranges. You're looking at muscle strength, your hip abductors, adductors. You're looking at strengthening the ankles, yeah? And of course, you have to optimize the loading capacity of the knee. So you want to do progressive resisting exercises. Again, a combination of dry land and, of course, in water exercise program. My bibliography is up, and I want to thank you for listening, and I hope I was able to shed some light on the management of swimming injuries. Thank you all for listening, and we'll take questions as per the moderator.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown. Do we have any questions for the two presenters that just went? Let me check the chat to see if there are any questions.
Not seeing it in the chat so far. We're open. Well, one, Ms. Manderson was asking if the presentations, the materials were made available afterwards. So I said,
Yeah, no, I'm not hearing too well. If you can repeat.
oh, so that's my sound. Is this better? Sorry. Better? Right. I was just saying, Ms. Manderson was asking, Jordan Manderson was asking whether the presentations were made available afterwards PowerPoints. So it says up to the presenters. Guess they can decide.
Mr. Alvaranga's hand is up.
Hi, evening. I would have seen a wide range of injuries while we talk about the shoulder being the dominant one, and yes, the knee is number 2. We have other areas, but for your question, what if the technique? This is Piran, and I'm playing devil's advocate. Please don't hit me, Diallo. If the technique is okay with the breaststroke knee pain, where we look, what could be the next possible thing, and the pain persists?
So remember, we would have to check, probably looking at ranges of motion, looking for muscle imbalances to see if there is anything there. We are also want to check what the dry land exercise program might be, or what their cross-training program might be, as to what might be causing the pain. You have to look at the feet or look at the ankle as well in your assessment. Overuse is a possibility. There are other structures at the knee, so internal structures, what is happening there. So we have to think that it's not necessarily coming from, or it might not necessarily be coming from in the boot. As you say, the technique might be correct, but remember, we walk on land. Your swimmers, operate outside of the pool as well. What is it that they're doing? So you have to look at all the plausible explanations or reasons that they might be having or coming up with. But most often is the valgus stress on the knee, or the amount of stress that is placed on the medial aspect of the knee, especially for breaststroke swimmers.
Thank you. I've seen them all. I've seen them all, Pierre, and that's why I throw it out there for coaches, parents that may not be there. Swimming, not every program has a dry land. And I have shared documentation. Diallo, no secret, is my go-to strength conditioning guy. Dr. Simpson, the moderator, is my go-to PT. And there are times when both of them are off the island because they're highly sought after. And, I want to ask that we put together a pool for the interested person, pool of PTs that we can use, because as I said, Diallo is a PT. Diallo, my go-to strength guy, when he's off with our Carifta team and Jody's gone with the female football team, what do? you know, we have these situations, and I find that with the knee issue is that you said you speak of muscle imbalance. Vastus medialis, is that it? Is that it, Diallo? Yeah, because the IT band tend to be tight in swimmers and stronger than inside, so the patella gets a lot of movement in the breaststroke. Been there, done that. So yeah, I thank you for that. The imbalances and not everybody ascribe to strength training because of the myth that growth plate and bone density and all this kind of stuff. A greater educational program need to be had about adolescents, especially with the advent of social media, the tablet, and the sedentary lifestyle.
Yes. Yes, sir.
I see a question from Jamel White. Would you say swimming biomechanics can be likened to walking as it relates to the gait cycle?
The gate cycle.
Gait cycle? Thank you.
As a coach,
That question, or
is a question for Piran or for myself?
not, did he make a statement, or is he asking a question?
I think he's asking about the similarities between the gait cycle and swimming biomechanics for Coach Alvarenga.
I hasten to say no, it does not. There are the difference with walking and swimming is that you don't have the stress on the joint. You apply stress through your action. You know, it's you're supported by the water, where the gate does not come into play here, and the gate has to support your weight bearing. Um, it's different. The knee flexion, the whole hip movement of the thing, I would say that it does not apply. And however, oops. However, you know, walking the gate thing applies to track and field, to football, because it's similar movement around, but for swimming, it's totally different. The absence of the weight bearing, where you're supported by the water. This is why I suppose Julian, the other persons will tie in cross training, where research suggests that a track athlete, an upright athlete, has a faster oxygen uptake than that of a swimmer. Why? Because you're lateral in the pool and the whole gravity, pull of gravity on the take up of oxygen, it is faster in an upright track athlete than that of a swimmer. So no, it does not apply in swimming.
I was going to comment on the amount of trunk extension that is involved in swimming as well, as opposed to walking or running, and you don't really lean back or go into much extension. Yes, you might have rotation, but there is way more rotation in swimming. Probably as other than with the throwers, really. But with the runners, you wouldn't have that much rotation. And the swimmers usually are stuck or have decreased mobility in the thoracic spine, as opposed to a runner might typically have restriction in, say, the hamstrings or the L spine. What is that so, Rory?
That is correct. We don't see people walking around swinging their hips left, right. So yes, the whole rotation and the main takeaway, the person that asked the question, I don't recall the name, is that you're lateral, you're laying down. Gravity keeping us here on the earth plays a large part in a lot of our movements. And in swimming, you're lateral, so you're supported by the water. So where the weight bearing on the joints, the knees, the hips, and so forth, comes into play in walking. It's not so in swimming.
All right, I had a question, well, two questions. Piran, you did mention,
Audrey's question about age
oh,
and
overall.
it again, and level of participation or skill. The researches that are out are poses a low level of certainty as to whether age or sex or level of participation or skill correlates with shoulder pain. What Rory is going to see is going to be different from probably what I would have pulled up in research. So I don't know if he has any take on that. Younger swimmers complain of shoulder pain versus elite swimmers or older swimmers.
Hold on, microphone, the video. Excuse me. Yeah, with the thing I do with, and I speak of self, the thing I do with younger swimmers is make it more fun. It's a playful atmosphere. If it's not fun, it's not for the children. So you find that those that take swimming more serious, the national level, Carifta, CC Can, World Championship swimmers, those are the ones that you see start to experience the thing, that the injuries, right? The more they push themselves to make the national cuts, is the more stress they place on the joints, and the more you see injury as they, especially in the 13, 14 and above age group, that's where you start to see more injuries. Diallo, hand up.
Yeah, man, but you can finish your response. I can
Yeah, man. So age, as far as age appropriate, it applies to the program, the coach, and how they do it. But I hasten to say, Dr. Hamilton, Scotty, big up. In my experience is that I use the entire sports medicine arms that you have, like an octopus. Dr. Olivia Rose, we find that a lot of parents will ask for more for their children because their child must come first. And when you want it to be fun, you're asking to treat this child as a mini Olympian, and both on their psychological and physical being, it is not so. So for me, you treat the younger ones as they are children, make it fun, and the older ones that are serious about the sport, you challenge them, and I introduce them to land training, strength training, where we get the imbalances sorted out to minimize risk of injury. Did I answer the question?
So, for me, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Diallo, did you have a question?
Yeah, man, I did, but before that, I say Jamel White was adding to his previous question. So Coach Rory, right, so he was saying in terms of gait and swimming, he's saying he's more thinking in terms of the different phases of gait. So for example, with walking, or you have the heel strike, hitting the ground and propelling yourself, versus with swimming now, I guess when the arm enters the water. So I guess he's looking at it from that point of view. Would you say those are similar?
Jamil, no. The supporting of the water takes away a lot of impact. Doctors correct me, those in here will recommend swimming for people with impact joints.
True.
You know, where you have the impact on the joints, the gait, the walking, the movement, the thing they recommend aerobics. And I know Jody uses the water to lessen the impact and get the muscles to work outside of the impact mode of walking, weight bearing, and stuff like that. Is that so with you too, Piran?
I agree. I was just typing in that the buoyancy plays a major major role in terms of lessening the stresses on the joints of the lower extremity.
And Jamil, the arm entering the water, it's not impact. You do meet resistance as water is 800 times more dense than the air, but it's not really impact per se. It's a soft entry.
And like I said in my presentation, the elite, by the time the swimmer gets to the elite phase, most of the time they're hitting the ranges, they're getting the high elbow, they're getting, you know, everything to gel at that stage. So they get it. The
They'd have gone,
are going in or lessening the splash, they have it down to a pat by the time they're elite athletes.
Fully Piran, because you put up some mats up there that I never went into the mats of it all, but those overhead mats there, 52 weeks multiplied by yes, hopefully it is hope that they have it right by then, or their bodies learn to compensate.
That's true. I've worked with the Fraser brothers in Cayman and learning to treat swimmers. I'm thankful that I was able to interact with their coach, to the extent of intervention, Rory, and you know, swimmers asking for massage. And I remember my first experience with them. I went in and did massage and everything. And the following day, thankfully it wasn't quite competition yet, but I had the report that, oh, I'm so loose, I'm so lax, I'm cutting the water, I'm not feeling anything, that sort of thing. The technique was just off a little after that massage. And then you learn, or as you go about treating them, you want them relaxed, or you want the soft tissue moves to be there, but you don't want to get them that relaxed, or the muscles that relaxed, so they can't feel the water, they can't cut, they can't pull, you know, and feel that. So working with swimmers, I'd say PTs, doctors, like I said, you have to be at the training session, you have to listen to your swimmers, you have to work with the coach, definitely. And you know, you'll be hitting it or getting the maximum out of rehabbing or preventing, or just getting the best performance from the swimmers.
I'd like to hasten, Piran, to add, you speak of listening to your swimmers, even thanks to sports medicine, Jason, Olivia Rose, listening to them goes beyond injury, it goes to their experience, what they're going through. You know, I recently had a parent complain to me about the child, you know, coach, you're not eating and da. And I spoke to her, you know, does she speak about swimming? Does she this? Does she that? While it's not on cross-training swimming, I hasten COVID-19, everything just plays so much on the children that we need to listen to them and tell the parents, so, you know, do you think the child is depressed because of the home environment? I hear so much in the news about this, but yes, listen to your children. Coach, my shoulder, I had one just this week. The forearm, is this the first time? She said, yes. I said, okay, go home and ice it. Ice it this evening, ice it tomorrow morning, ice it, you know, and we monitor from that. I saw her yesterday, Saturday. Did you feel it this morning? She was like, no, coach. You know, listening to them, and Diallo, Jody, Matthew Parchment, I've seen and heard so much that I can know when it's ice or know when it's to go straight to Diallo, you know, for the pain that I hear.
All right, see me, coach. We're gonna move on from the Q&A shortly. I don't know if I can squeeze in one more. Jody, let me know if I can.
Yes, you can go ahead with the
All right. because Piran, you mentioned the thoracic spine and the importance there, and that is an issue. Aurora, I know you've seen this as well. You know who I'm talking about, a particular symbol, that posture, a kyphotic posture. Piran, how do you recommend really going up, tackling that, so to speak? That improve the kyphotic posture, the thoracic spine mobility, and so on. What do you recommend?
So, Diallo, I am hearing that you're asking about the thoracic spine, but
Oh,
I'm
you're not hearing me, sorry.
hearing what were the specifics?
No, just asking
Maybe-
how do you recommend addressing it at best? Improving the thoracic spine, position and posture, and mobility. I think you mentioned that in your presentation.
So it's a combination of intervention. Yes, so you are going to add you're going to combine your soft tissue moves, you're going to add your manual therapy. You're going to develop an exercise program. The swimmers themselves can help using their foam rollers or thoracic roller. If you have a dome archer, it can either be, you can even use a Bosa ball or a Theraball for the dome arching to get extension. Foam rollers or different sizes foam rollers work. Yeah, just about that, and you try working on it. Jody had a very interesting one that she usually do with the persons in healing and using a pole to do the thoracic rotation and extension. She can speak to that too. What else do we do? If you have a TheraBand station, you can look at your lows, your pulls, your pushes.
Right.
Going on your bubble board to get, encourage thoracic extension. Just off the top of my head, those are the things that I can think of. Jody, anyone else in the audience that treats swimmers here to add to how we'd increase that?
Increasing the thoracic spine mobility, rotation, extension. It's just similar to what you mentioned in different techniques, because I personally will use even the wall as a marker, stabilizing the lumbar spine by, making the hips steady against the wall with one knee up and then turning the upper body, so rotating the upper thoracic spine to get that mobility, trying to reach the other hand to the back of the wall, to the wall behind them. So that's one technique. It can also be done in lying, where you're still stabilizing lumbar spine and opening up. It can be done in kneeling, 4-point kneeling. So, and you can use as you mentioned, the foam roller as well to help improve and increase extension and rotation of the key side. So yeah, that's basically it. And I'm sure as figures we can come up with some more creative ways to get that going. Coach Alvarado, do you have another question before we move on to the next presentation?
Well, real quickly, Diallo, Diallo is my teacher, incidentally, and yourself, Doc Simpson. It is 60% of swimmers own foam rollers, and only 1% of swimmers uses it. Sadly, right? And then there is, when they come to the land training, as Diallo has emphasized, it is that a 3-to-1 front to back ratio, because of those hunching and lack of thoracic movement, work on those scapulars. I've had the experience of latissimus dorsis being too powerful for the middle and lower traps because of the pull-ups and the swimming exercises. So, having a good strength coach like Dr. Brown, Jody recommend exercises is good towards those rotations and balancing of the muscles.
You know what I just thought of? Punches in boxing are actually,
What do you say, punches?
yeah, punches in boxing punches.
That's a punching bag deal, all right?
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yes, yes, yes. Never thought of that. Yeah.
that the uppercuts, the jab, all of that.
Afraid of those punching bag though, Doc. They may come home and they may fight me on deck, you know.
You just have to mix it up, make it creative, make it enjoyable for the younger swimmers and the elite swimmers to enjoy the cross.
I agree. Thank you guys for the healthy conversation. We are going to move on now to our next presenter, Dr. Marlene Chin. And Dr. Marlene Chin is a doctor of physical therapy from Howard University and the proud owner of the Athlete Spa in Kingston. She has spent the last 18 years practicing across the healthcare spectrum with a focus on orthopedic, geriatric, and neuromuscular populations. On top of her therapy background, Dr. Chin is also a certified fascial stretch therapist and life stretch coach. In recent years, Dr. Chin has expanded her scope of practice to include cutting-edge technologies and techniques dedicated to improving the recovery process, reducing pain, and optimizing performance, health, and wellness. She's passionate about helping her clients reach their highest potential. And a fun fact, Dr. Marlene Chin is an identical twin who she says is the total opposite of herself. Let's welcome Dr. Marlene Chin presenting on cross-training in sports.
Thank you for that fantastic introduction. We're actually not identical, but we're fraternal, but we're still opposite anyway, so it's interesting. Thank you for that. So good afternoon, everyone. Is my screen fine here? I really can't tell.
Yeah, we're seeing a question signs. Yes, your screen is up.
Oh, we're already at questions. Okay. Thank you. So as just mentioned, I am Dr. Marlene Chin, physical therapist and certified fascial stretch therapist. And today I'm going to be talking about cross-training in sports. So what is cross-training? Cross-training is a term that refers to a training or a sport or an exercise program other than the primary training mode designed to help an athlete's overall performance in his or her main sport. Now, cross-training, however, is not a new concept because it started gaining popularity in the early 1980s with the introduction of the triathlon in 1974. And it has since become an accepted training approach. Now, research has shown, research has shown that outside of the principles of training specificity, you can still increase your muscular balance, increase your overall muscular strength, improve endurance and stamina, increase flexibility, reduce burnout, enhance sport-specific performance, and reduce the risk of injuries. Now, an effective cross-training program encompasses the main pillars of fitness. And for me, I think is very important and perhaps the most underutilized is flexibility training, which is designed to improve range of motion, elastic recoil of the muscle tendon unit, and joint mobility. Strength training, as we know, increases the muscle size, the motor output, and power. And endurance training enhances the cardiac output, the maximum oxygen consumption, and mitochondrial biogenesis, which is basically the process of increasing the size and the number of your mitochondria, which means you get more energy available to the working muscles. So, depending on the athlete's goal and the sport-specific requirement, for example, speed, agility, power, or endurance, participating in a cross-training regimen, it can provide the desired results that most athletes and coaches aim for, which is to boost your strength, enhance your performance, and avoid injuries. I will say this is that cross-training is not a substitute for training specificity, but it does, you're able to provide these essential components. So I have just given a bit of examples of how cross-training can increase, let's say, strength. We can use techniques like blood flow restriction training, which is based on the principles of muscle hypertrophy, plyometrics, which enhances your explosive power and also strengthening that muscle tendon unit. And we have resistance training, whether that's free weights, resistance bands, or parachute on dry land or in water. And there's many other different activities incorporated. This is, again, just to list a few. For endurance training, there are things like rowing, high intensity interval training, and cycling. Again, that can be on the road or a stationary bike. And then lastly, we have of the main pillars, flexibility training, where we have activities such as Pilates, yoga, and as I would say, not just normal stretching, but fascial stretching. The thing is that when you allow the athlete to focus on the different aspects of fitness, you don't only help them improve their overall athleticism, but it is essential to reducing the risk of injury. Now, for example, based on the cross-training exercises that I just mentioned, based on the exercises that I just mentioned, the cross-training can provide a different demand on the body to alleviate those external loads that are repetitively placed on the athlete through their primary mode of training. It provides an opportunity to strengthen the weaker opposing muscles and avoid muscle imbalance that can lead to injuries. It allows your body to use and develop different muscle groups for overall strengthening and stability. It can increase the muscle tendon compliance, which has been shown to increase the risk for sprains, strains, and tears when the tendon is either too lax or too stiff. It can reduce the amount of stress that is placed on the joints, like we heard previously for swimming, usually high impact people, but it reduces the amount of stress on the joints. But also on the flip side, it can increase the amount of stress on the body, which is what is highly recommended in swimmers, by the way, because there is some research that out there that says that swimmers tend to have a lower bone mineral density than other high impact sports, because a lot of their training is in weight alleviating environment, i.e. the water, and weaker bones can also increase the risk for injuries. Cross-training can also, this thing is in my way here, sorry. Cross-training can also allow the prime muscles to actively recover. Now, while you're working those other muscle groups. Now, this is not to say that you don't want to have a true rest and recovery period for your athletes, but it can help to actively recover those that you are not using. The variation in the training program with all the different cross-training activities can keep the athlete engaged and motivated and reduce burnout. If you use the appropriate exercises, you can balance the tissue, you can improve their biomechanics, and you can create a stable foundation and thereby reducing the risk of some of those common injuries we heard, like impingement overuse, sprains and strains, and the like. What I have on the next slide is just a couple of common cross-training activities for swimmers in particular. They give you the different benefits to the particular athlete's needs, and it scores from 0 to 10. Obviously, the higher the score, the better it is for that particular activity. The second slide provides some pros and cons, and even provides some risk factors on the different activities that you may want to implement into your cross-training program. But, and again, I do have an additional slide for runners, as I was told to prepare for both running and swimming. So I do have a similar slide for running and different cross-training activities there. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the presentation, cross-training activities can also include participating in another sport. Now, the research does suggest that multi-sport athletes, they gain the same benefits as the other cross-training activities that I just discussed, in addition to mastering the different skill sets and the bodily movements that they can transfer between sports and make them an overall better athlete. Now, studies have also found that single sport athletes are at greater risk of overuse injuries and muscle imbalances than the athletes who play and train in multiple sports. Now, before I close, I just wanted to say that it is important that cross-training be carefully planned and integrated into the training program. See, if cross-training is just simply added to the existing training volume, this is just going to increase the total training load and then consequently increase the risk of overtraining, which would then lead to increased risk of injuries, and even worse yet, could decrease the performance of the athlete. So, in closing, the type of activities they participate in, the resistance, the frequency, the duration, the load, and the proper integration into the primary training program makes for a resilient athlete. That is my quick and dirty of cross-training in sports for the risk and benefits. I have provided some references, very good articles. A lot of them are on Swimming Coach, if you're so inclined. And are there any questions?
You didn't progress the slides. So we're only seeing the benefit of cross-training, the first slide.
Are you kidding me?
Nope.
And I've been looking to hit and enter the whole time.
Wait, are you sure?
No,
I was seeing
I
them.
saw them. I saw them as
Oh.
well. Mhm.
Oh, I only saw benefits of cross-training.
Yeah, man,
Oh.
I was seeing them.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, Lord have mercy.
Yeah, man, most
Okay.
persons saw them already.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I guess I can unshare my screen now.
Thank you, Dr. Chin.
You're welcome.
Nice and short.
Yes.
Very informative. Do we have any questions for Dr. Chin?
All right, I have one.
I have
Okay.
one.
Yellow, really?
Okay. You spoke about cross training. So of course I'm sure you know about CrossFit. Because like to me, it's like it's made a sport out of exercise, out of cross training. But what are your thoughts on CrossFit? Is it a good training method? Is it good for athletes? What are your thoughts on CrossFit?
You know, the funny thing is in the research, it does say that, I mean, it has its pros and its cons like everything else. CrossFit can increase the likelihood of injury. If you're an athlete, you might not want to, you know, participate in something that, unless you're doing a good technique and, you know, somebody's training you through those techniques, it might be okay because you get both the endurance and the strengthening component together. But Other than that, the likelihood of injury could increase just from, like we were talking, poor mechanics and things like that. But again, for the endurance strength component, absolutely.
I know usually what they say is, as you mentioned, what tends to happen in CrossFit a lot of times that people train under fatigue and they're doing the big power lifts, the technical exercise, or they're trying to do plyometrics while fatigued, high volume and so on. So I think, as you mentioned, that contributes to the high rate of injuries and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Dr. Marlene, how you doing?
Yes, sir.
This is Richard James. I am stationed in New York, and I wanted to ask you a question. You did say something about unit sports athlete getting a lot of overuse injuries. Since the pandemic, have you seen a lot of lower leg injuries or overuse in the lower leg for runners since the pandemic?
I'm gonna tell you what, I have seen so many lower leg injuries in runners that I'm amazed at why this is probably not a big thing. I mean, I just worked at Champs just passed, and almost everybody came in there with a hamstring injury. And then I watched the first week of Carifta, and all of those people fell out on the. I'm like, what is happening here? It's a pandemic for real. I mean, so I've seen a lot of lower leg injuries. Now, I wouldn't claim it. There's so many reasons, right? We can have for hamstring injuries, whether it's overuse, overtraining, right? Burnout, all those different things, not stretching enough, maybe not strengthening, completely for those, for the muscles to be balanced. But they all go hand in hand, and it's like one big puzzle, and we can't do one without the other. And that's kind of the point of what I'm trying to say as far as cross training is that, yeah, we can do training specificity and they're great athletes, but are they a complete great athlete? Are they gonna, fall out before they even reach a good status? We have to combine everything and make the athlete, like I said, resilient. That's my thoughts.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any more questions?
Good evening or good afternoon. This is Angela McIntosh. Just a comment about overtraining. There was a time when we had athletes who would do football and they would do track and field and maybe another sport. And I remember there was a time we discouraged them from mixing the sports, especially football and track and field, because of the nature of the sport as well as the type of injuries that they would get. Exactly. Dr. Chin mentioned that, and I do believe it is so, that yes, the cross training and the different sports can help them to develop, develop different musculature and so. But I know I had an athlete once, he was doing javelin, he did football, and he did track and field, but eventually he had to choose because he was getting certain injuries that would affect the other sport. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I have read a lot of research on that for sure. And so when they play multi-sport, that is the risk. I didn't mention any of the risk of doing multi-sports, only kind of like the benefits, but you can. And what they usually recommend, one is that as they're young and they're growing, that they participate in multi-sport, and they only should start specializing between, like into 16 years old, right? Where they start to specialize, because at that level of training, it's not so intense, but secondly, with I forgot my train of thought here. We were talking about the playing in with multi-sport. So yes, that it does have another risk. Oh, I know what I was going to say. That usually what they typically try to also, and I say they, I'm talking about the research. There's many articles out there, but that if you are in a high impact sport, that you probably want to do a low impact sport, right? And switch it up. Or if you're in a low, so let's say, for example, that you play football, then perhaps doing baseball would be a good, so there's different comparisons. If you're a runner, your cross sport would be swimming. And if you're swimming, then you understand what I'm saying? So that you reduce that risk of injury that may interfere with your primary or main sport. Is that helpful?
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Doc. How you doing? Afternoon. Rory here, Coach Rory Swimming.
Hey, Coach.
Yeah, I like the baseball, football, Barry Sanders, isn't it?
Yes,
but
wait, there's a whole lot more.
yeah, but you spoke of specificity and you're talking my language, which is what USRPT is hinged on. One of the things Piran mentioned is about the communication between the coach. Whenever we're in our aerobic phase, to avoid that overtraining, Diallo is told that we are in aerobic and he will do the anaerobic kind of stuff.
That's right.
When we are moving into the anaerobic phase, he will move to more
Aerobic.
whatever he needs to do. But we don't want to overload them anaerobically. So the line of communication has to be between the various coaches that form the team. Diallo knows, I'll tell Diallo, oh, the next swim meet is not a target. So he could keep loading. And while we are doing refining and stuff like that. But once we get to the major competition, he actually asks when are the major competition and send him those competition, and he does his program towards those. So this is one way, the communication between the strength coach, the land coach, and the whatever coach it is, in this case swimming, that you do not overtrain, because as you said, anaerobic is anaerobic, right, and explosive. And the specificity nature that you mentioned, I smiled when I heard it, is because we could do the balancing and everything. Diallo can't remember the guy's name, but you have to train in your environment, in your field of play, explosively, if it is an explosive sport or whatever it is. But the communication channel has to be open to ensure that you lessen the likelihood of the cons of cross training.
Absolutely 100, Coach. And that's exactly how it's supposed to operate. And that's why I said it has to be carefully planned and integrated into your normal training program, because if you do too much swim training and then go and, then go try to do an endurance training, you're still doing an overload, right? Overtraining, the athlete's going to get fatigued and stuff like that. So communication is key between the coach, the athlete, and the trainers, yes, or therapists, or whoever you use. So I agree and concur 100%.
The psychology, the whole sports medicine gamut, where everybody works together and know the end goal. Thank you, Doc.
Welcome, sir.
We have one question in the chat from Keila Gomez. How often per week should the athlete cross train, considering most times they already have very full weeks of sport specific training?
Great question. And the research will tell you that mostly you want to do at least two to three times per week of cross training. So, or you can do it in cycles. Now, coach would be better off to talk about these macro, micro, and meso cycles where they're doing, prepping, training, and then evaluating, but usually it's 2 to 3 times a week is what's recommended to do cross training for effectiveness.
All right, Mrs. Brown had her hand up. Mrs. Brown?
Hi, yes. I'd like to underscore dancing as an exercise in cross training. I can't swear about the new dances that are about to singing your body left, right, center, etc. But
Is Miss Brown breaking up, or is it just me?
Mrs. Brown, we're not hearing you clearly.
Yeah, our sound is a little distorted.
you hear me now?
Yes.
Better, yes, yeah.
Better. Okay. I was saying, it came to mind to underscore dancing as one of those exercises that you can do in cross training because we can easily integrate it into our culture. It's been pushed in the US now. I can't swear to many of the dances that we are doing here in Jamaica, flinging the body or flinging the shoulder. And however, I
Or
would
jumping on speakers.
I would advocate formal dancing. So your ballroom dancing, maybe your Latino dancing, you know, other forms of dancing just as the extra in terms of cross training.
Yeah, absolutely.
And coach, please remember too that there can be increased incidence of injuries like in tapering, as I mentioned before. So yes, the aerobic, anaerobic, but other stuff, dancing that you say, have a dance evening, have somebody come in and do a dance class with the swimmers. It's fun and you're using
Right.
other
Pilates, yoga, you know, they think those are wuss exercises, but they're very effective for core training, especially for swimmers that, fascial stretching and yoga and Pilates for core. I mean, the core is what the athletes and swimmers need to depend on as all their extremities are moving, you know, at different rates. That core has to be firm.
and even for other athletes as well. Yeah,
Yes.
it does not cross training doesn't necessarily mean that you play another sport. It for me it means that you do other activities that you get to do with other muscles than the one you use with your primary sport.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody has a different impression or a different view on that. But you're a run, have a dance exercise, or a Pilates or a yoga exercise. They're cross training.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree. Dancing, Pilates, yoga, all of those use, you know, different muscles. So those cross training with those exercises are beneficial.
And I see Marlando put up that NFL team use yoga and Pilates. Hey, there you go.
Oh, well, that was B, but yeah.
Denzel has a question in the group. He said, good evening, and just sharing that the average youngster, male and female, especially in the country, play several sports on a routine day. Sadly or beneficially, this culture follows our athletes into even their professional life. How does the panel view this, and should there be a culturalization to reduce the possible injury risk, or it is not necessary?
Well, I would venture to say, and I had a list of all the multi-sport all-timers, right? Because when you play different sports, you gain different skills and you become a better athlete. For example, Bo Jackson, I think he mentioned, but there are so many other athletes that cross-train. And if you can participate in the sports without the reoccurrence of injury, because like I said, but the sport shouldn't be as close to as the one you're using, because you will have an overuse, overtrain situation going on, but a lot of people do it. And the last tidbit of fact, if the athlete can endure such a thing, is that I think in 2017, the study said that 25 out of 32 athletes that were picked for the NFL draft were all multi-sport athletes. So it's not that bad, but it just.
Can I interject here? I agree with you there, Marley. I did a talk on sports, early sports specialization, and what you see is what is preached both in the NBA and the NFL. The studies show that athletes that in the NBA and the NFL that played multiple sports throughout high school and college had longer careers and less injuries. You know, and what you said about the NFL draft is absolutely correct. The top draft picks And a lot of the top players now in the NFL are multi-sport players who played up to the level of minor league, not minor league, but baseball, World Series in high school. Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, they were all multi-sport. Deion Sanders, you spoke about Bo
Yes,
Jackson.
that's what I was saying, yes.
All the top, a lot of the top athletes in these sports played multiple sports. LeBron played football. LeBron James played football and basketball. Michael Jordan played basketball and baseball. Randy Moss was a wide receiver, played the track and field and was a football player. And he also played basketball. So it is encouraged when they're growing. It's just a matter of how you just not to overuse the kid, not to make sure that they don't overdo it in any one sport. And that has a lot to do with the coaching and the management of how they participate in each sport. You know, but it is encouraged and it does reduce, and the studies show that those athletes have less injuries and longer pro careers if they make it to the top level.
It is also true why I encourage swimmers to train all four strokes, because the muscle development, it will make you a more rounded athlete. But we must remember, as the question said about culturally, in the US, sports are seasonal. In Jamaica, track and field and football is year-round, right? Then we have that parent element where if my child is higher ranked at swimming, I will push him or her there. If my child is higher ranked in track and field, I will push him and her there. Then there are those who want their child to be winners in everything. Another we have to be careful of.
I agree. I get it comes out to management. And that includes parents and coaches mainly. A lot of times, a lot of the damage is caused by overzealous parents, both mentally and physically. And that's unfortunate.
I should laugh.
It's the facts.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Just want to chime in. I'm Richard again. I'm the Director of Sports Performance at Poly Prep Country Day School. We're based in Brooklyn, New York. We have a system where all of our athletes, we kind of require them to play more than one sports because we understand the social, emotional, and physical benefits of having the athlete not focus on this one skill set. Because even our baseball players, we have a very low incidence of shoulder injuries with our baseball players because they're track athletes, they're football athletes, they play volleyball, they play squash. So we try to get our athletes to be well-rounded. And that is just a part of how we help to reduce the risk of burnout and injury. Because we've figured out, and this is through years of trial and error, that a well-rounded athlete is one who can run, jump, throw, catch, and win when it's time for them to win.
That's right.
Omar West has his hand up.
Yeah, hi everybody. My background is a little loud, so I hope you can hear me. I'm just curious, how much emphasis our local athletes put on strength and conditioning throughout the year, not just when their season is coming up. How much emphasis do we put on strength and conditioning? And if we had more emphasis throughout the year, do you think that would reduce our incidence of injuries in various sports?
Great question, Mr. Omar West. Excellent question. Who are you asking? Dr.
I'm not
Chin?
looking at the presenters.
Okay. Dr. Chin, Rory.
Gone are the days when swimming had out of season. Swimming is all year round sport. That's how you make it, because during the August to September months after the major championship is what is considered base training. athletes to come out for base training? No. Do I advertise it? Yes. As Dr. Jones said, it comes down to management, and I want to add education. Right? We see Manning Cup teams coming out in August and training in preparation for the upcoming season. But no, with swimming, strength training is year round. The different phases with Diallo and myself, it depends on where we are in the season. There's no need to qualify for Carifta before February of next year, so we can do a lot of loading and balancing and stuff like that. There's no year-round strength training program, and this is where we lose a lot of the the onset of tablet and social media, the smartphones now make we lose a lot of movement literacy in our athletes. Richard speak of them having the different sports and the different seasons up there that they do them, and you encourage them. I know my daughter went to Immaculate, and in the first season you do swimming. Second season, I think you do for swimming or netball. Second season, you do tennis and track and field and so forth. So some kind of management is attempted, but then again, it's up to the parent as to which sport you stick to, and that sport coordinator will determine when you do the strength training.
If I may, to Jody, usually I find that most of the coaches in whatever sport, they do have a fairly decent strength and conditioning program. Attending development meets, camps, etc. What we do find is that I'd say probably 80 to 90% of the time, these athletes lack flexibility. We're looking at tight hamstring, we're looking at tight feedback, we're looking at tight upper body muscles, we're looking at the tightness is just there. I would love it at some point in time over their training period, and I'm not talking for swimmers specifically, but in the other sports, there should be a place in your training program or whatever your program is for the year that flexibility is taught, and that our athletes understand that flexibility does not come overnight, and basically because expresses properly and how to express. But I find that for majority of the injuries or athletes who come in for treatment, that is a really great problem. Not so much the strength, because I mean most of the time if they are dedicated athletes, when you do a muscle test on them, they're strong. Even if they're injured, you will get good figures in terms of creating muscle power or muscle strength. It takes a really long period of deterioration to happen or serious injury to the muscle to appreciate decreased muscle power. But flexibility for me, or what I see, is a great topic in terms of
Well, I thank you so much for that. I didn't want to be the one to say it since I'm a certified stretch therapist. However, I agree, flexibility is a lot of the hangups. I mean, in the ankles, the hamstring, and not talking, can you bend down and touch your toes? It's like the true flexibility of being able to apply that to mobility and still have the strength and the power to do your sport, so was that Miss Pierre who said that? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Marlando, are you there? You have a question? Marlando?
Is it Marlando or me? Maybe me.
Is it you? I'm
Yes.
sure it's Marlando.
I don't know.
We can, I don't know, Diallo, if you have a question, you can go ahead and then you move on to the other presentation.
No problem. It's a quick question, a quick point. Actually, back to what Marion was saying, but I guess it's reinforced by everybody. Marion mentioned cross trading. Well, I guess this would be just within one sport, but they're doing, I guess they call it fitness. So it's a sport, let's say it's a land-based sport where there's a lot of running up and down already. And then as a part of their fitness trading, they do additional running. So I'm thinking, for example, I've seen, for example, cricketers where a lot of their training is running, just running for mileage and so on. And then on top of that, so that's their fitness component. On top of that, they have their regular training. But what I find interesting that there's not, as you mentioned, there's not a balance in terms of the overall volume, in this case, in terms of running. And so the coaches want to know why some of the athletes have shin splits. So I think that kind of underscores the point that you were making in terms of, for example, if they do a lot of one aspect of trading, there's no need to add so much in terms of the cross trading. So it's kind of underscoring your point there. But I think it's something that our coaches need to bear in mind as well.
We have a comment before you go on, Doc Simpson. Bertrand Blackman, strength training is not something that we take seriously as it is put behind the school, where did it jump to? It is put behind the school times and financial costs. We sometimes believe we will start when we get better. And Piran, sadly, when you speak of most of the schools with gym, we're talking about the traditional schools, because recently Diallo and myself found out that a lot of schools had nothing. We were trying to put them to the time, that a gym doesn't have to be shiny equipment. You could go to the tire shop and get different size tires from a 12-inch up to a tractor tire, and you start your lifting exercises and different kind of things. So not all the schools, but it's amazing how the Jamaican schools without get to shine sometimes.
Yes, that's true. You don't need a lot of gym equipment to start strength training. And as Bertram mentioned, the mentality that we will start strength training when we get better is backward in itself. Because in order to get better, we need to start strength training first. Thank you, everyone, for the healthy, conversation. We're having thoroughly cross-training in sports. Our next presenter will be presenting something very debatable and current right now. He is our own Dr. Kevin Jones, and he currently works at the Mandeville Regional Hospital, where he holds a post of consultant orthopedic surgeon. He's also an associate lecturer at the University of the West Indies in the Department of Surgery, Radiology, Anesthetics, and Intensive Care. He received his undergraduate degree at Princeton University and did his postgraduate degree at both the University of the West Indies and at the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. He's a member of multiple professional organizations, the Jamaica Orthopedic Association, the Caribbean Association of Orthopedic Surgeons, the Jamaica Orthopedic Association, the American Association of Orthopedic Surgeons. He is also the chairman of the Therapeutic Use Exemption Committee of JADCO. And his research interest lies in fractures of the lower leg, injuries in high school athletes and their management. A fun fact about Dr. Jones, he is a top chef, and he has volunteered at charity event Men Who Cook for Lions Club of Mandeville for the past 15 years. Let us welcome Dr. Jones speaking on XX versus XY. Where do we draw the line?
Okay, thank you very much, Jody, and thanks for the introduction, what it's worth. All right, so my picture and the rest of stuff doesn't appear on the poster because I'm a late addition. I think somebody dropped out. I know there were some belly issues that were taking place, and so as a result of that, I was added at not quite the last minute, but the last day-ish or whatever. So yeah, so my face pops up now and not on the poster. The topic that I'm going to go in is something I've spoken to about before, trying to put it into perspective, given the current situation that's going on. It continues to rear its head because of the various lawsuits and so forth that are in place. Everybody's seeing my screen, a shared screen.
Yes, we're seeing it.
All right, so I tried to break this down to provide clarity on the situation because there's a lot of emotion and emotional sentiment attached to this topic, and people a lot of times forget the facts when they make their comments and when they write their articles in the newspapers and other things. So I will just try to break it down to the bare essentials, and that's why I've posed the topic as XX versus XY, because that is really what it boils down to. A lot of this issue is both, I think, both medical, legal, and other legal aspects where a lot of things are not said about the different athletes because that would involve you exposing or revealing a lot of their personal medical information to the public and the world. And as a result of that, a lot has been implied based on the rules that have been put down and those athletes that have had to withdraw from competing in various events because of the rules that have been applied. So you don't hear clearly, so I'm not going to, and I'm going to go along that line, and I'm not going to say whether somebody is XX or XY, but you can imply it from the fact that they're no longer competing in the event what the nature of their underlying genetics is. All right, so warning, especially to my friend Dr. Scott Hamilton, especially if you're in Florida and you have all those new DeSantis rules. Will be going into a variety of images and so forth, which might not be legally displayed in Florida in your books and other things like that. And if you're in a state where you have issues with that, close your blinds and lock the doors and watch out for the extremists. Okay, so this goes back to gender assignment. What is gender assignment? Now, gender assignment is based on the appearance of, was initially, and this is where we get into trouble, based on the appearance of external genitalia at birth. That is known as a phenotype. Now, recognize the background of the different persons that are on this platform, varying from doctors down to coaches and so forth. And so I'll try to present images and explain things so that everybody can have a decent understanding. So originally, gender assignment is based on what the external genitalia of the child appears at birth. The child is born, and if the child's external genitalia looks like the picture here on the left here, the arrow is pointed to, they say that child was a male child. If the child is born and the genitalia, external genitalia looks like this child here on the right, they say that is a female child. Now, as times went on and sometimes the appearance of the external genitalia became ambiguous and so forth, it became necessary to determine what was the genetic sex of the individual, whether they were an XX female, XX individual, or an XY individual. That's known as the genotype. And then now, since the recent years, I figure the last 10, 15 years or so, a person's gender now is not based on what your genitals look like or based on what your chromosomal makeup is, but on what you feel like. So if you feel like and you identify as being female, regardless of your genetics and your external appearance, then you are considered female. And then if you identify as a male, then you are considered male. Now the problem doesn't really occur with persons who identify as males because the physiology and other aspects don't create any advantage for people who are going XX trying to become males, but it's really for those who are XYs and trying to become female. And apart from the fact of you identifying with being one gender or the other, your country or wherever you are must recognize that, and therefore you are legally female or male, provided that your country's laws and so forth support that. So in certain countries, especially Middle Eastern and support where these things do not exist and they do not tolerate such things, your identification with that gender has nothing to will hold no water because they don't recognize such things in those countries. All right, so disorders of sexual development. So this follows from this. So we had and this is where a lot of the problems occur. Now, these are congenital conditions associated with atypical development of chromosomal, gonadal, or anatomical sex. So what it boils down to is that the reproductive organs and genitals do not develop normally, and so they do not appear as per the gender that their genetics dictate. So you could have somebody who is an XX individual, but the external genitalia at birth looks male, and so they're assigned as male until certain things take place. Or you can have somebody whose external genitalia look as female and they're assigned as females at birth. But when they hit puberty and other aspects of puberty kick in, their Y chromosomal traits will kick in then. And that's where the issue takes place. The incidence vary. They say it occurs about 1 in 5, for 1 in 5,500 persons. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia and mixed gonadal dysgenesis accounts for about 50% of these. Now, in disorders of sexual development, genetic what you have, and I'm trying to be very specific in the terms. So genetical XX females have phenotypical male external genitalia, like I mentioned before, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and then you have conditions where you have genetically male individuals, they are XY individuals with female external genitalia, so they are assigned a female gender at birth. But and some of them may go on to transition to develop more masculine features later on, and some of them won't. One of the conditions that causes this is androgen insensitive syndrome, otherwise known as testicular feminizing syndrome, and that's when the person is XY. However, their androgen receptors do not respond normally to androgen stimulation, and so they do not develop the masculinization features and develop all the advantages of being XY and developing masculine features and all the anabolic components that come with that. Other conditions that are associated with genetically male individuals with female external appearance genitalia includes patients with enzyme deficiencies and the 5-alpha reductase deficiencies, one that occurs in utero and results in ambiguous genitalia at birth, but however, at puberty, their genitalia tends to become more masculinized. Now, this is an individual with ambiguous external genitalia. This individual is an XX individual. It's a female. If you look at the picture on the left, and the separate at birth, the genitalia looks more male. However, on closer examination, you can see where, you have the genitalia. When they expose the different orifices and so forth, the genital is actually more female. However, at birth, the child is born and comes in with this apparent genitalia. They are assigned a male, a male gender and raised as a male until certain things prove otherwise. Now, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, these are women, and these are XX women, and their issue is that they have a condition where their ovaries produce an excess amount of male hormones, and this results in certain masculine features, in particular acne and facial hair, but they develop, otherwise everybody develop breast and body shape and so forth, quite common with with a regular female. A lot of them tend to be obese, and the fat cells are part of the things that are involved in andronizing a lot of the hormones that are produced. That's just a diagram that shows what happens in polycystic ovarian syndrome, where the fat cells produce excessive estrone, which feeds back into producing androstenedione, which results in a lot of masculinization features. Now, why I'm bringing polycystic ovarian syndrome, because this has formed the base of how they've determined what levels to set at what testosterone levels to set in XY females. And in polycystic ovarian syndrome, you get levels of between 0.22 and 1.36 nanomoles per liter. The normal, this is about twice, less than twice what you can get in normal female, of 0.094 to 0.826. The court for arbitration had set the normal levels in the female to be between 0.06 and 1.68. That's the range. And then you can see the normal males tend to develop testosterone levels between 0.836 and 14.452. Remember that your polycystic ovarian individuals are XX females, so they can't use testosterone as a XY female would. Now, this is just a diagram that shows testosterone metabolism. Won't dwell much time on that. What is it responsible for? Your secondary sexual characteristics, increased bone and muscle mass, which is where your athletic performance will come in. Increased body hair and external genital enlargement in the male and certain parts of the female. This is another diagram here. I just wanted to focus on what is circled in the red. The bottom line from increased testosterone levels, especially in XY individuals, is that there is an increase in protein synthesis, a decrease in protein breakdown, and you get formation of new myotubes and increase in myonuclear numbers. Bottom line, what this results in is an increase in muscle mass and strength and an increased ability to exercise. And that is why if you talk to most coaches, workouts, people used to train girls and boys at the same level with the same intensity. And over the years, coaches have recognized that to achieve optimal outcome in a lot of the females, the workouts have to be tailored, because the workloads for female athletes tend to be less than the workload that you would for your male athletes, and something that you have to take into consideration. Now, anabolic steroids is the primary sex hormone in men. It was prohibited by WADA. It is prohibited by WADA at all times. I think the first time, I think in the from the ban list came out, when WADA took it over, it has been prohibited. It's produced primarily by the Leydig cells in the testicles, and it's responsible for development of the penis, the testes, and the prostate. These are the bioavailable levels. This is in a chart form. However, if you look at it in a graph form, I think you can get a better understanding of what is going on. These are testosterone levels by age. Notice that between the first 11 years of life, so pre-puberty, boys and girls have similar levels of testosterone. Sometimes except girls have a certain higher level. And that explains why at the prep school, a lot of times, you have little girls that can beat your hiney. We went to prep school that had a co-ed prep school. A lot of times there are girls there that were equal to or better than you in sports at a certain point. And by the time you hit puberty, that difference starts to change, and that's because of the effects of testosterone. Now you notice that as you have hit puberty, the variation, the change in available testosterone levels in XY individuals increases dramatically over XX individuals, and you can see it's like several 10 times tenfold higher than it is in the female. And given that testosterone is one of the main, testosterone is a derivative, and its derivatives is, or they are one of the main performance enhancing drugs in the human being and in the animal kingdom as well. We can see why a lot of the rules have been put in place. Now, to go to the CAS ruling, this starts back from as far back as 2014. Everybody thinks, when people think about disorders of sexual development and all the testosterone regulations and controlling, as they think about, in particular, they think about Caster Semenya from South Africa. She has unfortunately become the poster child of these things. However, their situations existed before her, and one of the first cases that came up in terms of abnormally high testosterone levels occurred in an XX female known as Duty Chand of India, who broke all the Indian records, sprint records, when she was competing, and then blood tests showed that she had abnormally high testosterone levels. However, based on the fact that she eventually won her lawsuits against, at the time, IWF and so forth, and was allowed to compete, would suggest that she is an XX female. So she was allowed to compete. She was an XX female with higher than normal testosterone levels. And we'll go into why that becomes an issue or a non-issue. So her case led to the hyperandrogenism regulations that were developed by the IWF. Right? So in July 2015, CAS delivered an interim award partially upholding Ms. Chan's challenge and suspending the hyperandrogenism regulations, which were trying to restrict her testosterone levels. And the reason why she won was because she's an XX female and should take it from there. Now, CAS determined that the hormone testosterone was the primary cause for the increase in lean body mass in males at puberty, and this provided athletic advantages to males, or if you want to cut out the males, and to add athletic advantages to XY individuals over XX athletes. And the reason is that, so athletes with Y chromosomes, we talked about the androgen insensitive syndrome, where the person is XY, but their receptors cannot respond to testosterone as in the normal male. In these XY individuals, their androgen receptors can respond to testosterone as normal XY males, right? And as a result of that, that proved that they had advantages similar to men. Right now, the panel was not satisfied as to the degree of the advantage, and initially they declined to. So as a result, they declined to validate the hyperandrogenism rules. Right, the maximum level of testosterone at that time they considered to be 10 nanomoles per liter, and that was well above the maximum level in the female population and within the range of what you'd have find in the normal male population. Now, in 2018, the IWF enacted the DSDs, the Disorder of Sexual Differentiation Regulations 1. Right? Now, in summary, the DSD regulations established new requirements requiring the eligibility of XY women or XY individuals with certain differences of sexual development. We talk about the DSDs, and set out certain criteria to allow them to participate with XX females who don't have that advantage of being able to metabolize and utilize, or rather utilize testosterone like XY females. And this classification was confined to 8 events. I'm not in total agreement with all of them, but it was really from 400 meters up. A lot of persons will argue that there's a huge advantage. So the sprinters in 100 and 200 meters, and there are 2 DSD athletes from a particular African country who have shown that over the years, over the last couple of years. Now, the regulations are limited to XY females. this does not apply to XX females. And so these are conditions where the affected individual has XY chromosomes. So they're phenotypically female or raised as females, or they, for whatever reason, Dr. Hamilton might be able to give us some further support on this. They identify as being females, however, their chromosomes are XY. And as a result, they can use testosterone like normal men. No individuals with XX chromosomes are subjected to any restrictions or eligibility conditions under the DSD regulation. And you must be clear when you when we talk about this. Now, athletes with DSDs and XY have testosterone levels well into the male range. So they're pretty much testosterone levels within the male range that we presented. And you saw what they were relative to the females. And they have a natural testosterone level above 5 nanomoles per liter. And they experience material androgenizing effects from that enhanced testosterone level. They're not like the individuals, the XY individuals who do not androgenize because their androgen receptors cannot respond to testosterone. These athletes can, and you can see it a lot on how they appear and how they develop over time in adolescence in particular. Now, this is the original rule, and hence why I say the IWF proposal. A new proposal comes on the World Athletic, which is what IWF morphed into. Now they reduced based on the whole XY high chromosome, high testosterone levels. What the rule was that they had to reduce their testosterone levels to less than 5 nanomoles per liter. And had to be for a period of at least 6 months. And the reason why they have that 6-month period is because if it was less, you could train with high test, and this goes to male athletes who use anabolic exogenous testosterone. You could use the hormone and the positive effects to gain lean muscle mass, and then you could stop. However, the lean muscle mass doesn't disappear like that. And if you do enough after that, within less than a 3-month period, you would still have all the benefits of maintaining that lean muscle mass during that period of time. So you still have all the advantage, even though your testosterone levels had returned to below the legal limit, your muscle mass would have been enough.
Substitution on a goddess.
Sorry, that somebody yeah. All right. Their lean muscle mass that they gain through this time would be above a certain level, that would allow them to regain a competitive advantage. And that is why you have the 6-month period has come in place, is to allow things to balance out from that positive effect gained from having high testosterone levels and increased muscle mass during that period of high testosterone levels, and then allow the muscle mass to kind of return to a more normal level during that time, consistent with the reduced testosterone levels. And there's no requirement or suggestion for any surgical intervention to achieve this level. So they have not advocated surgery to change how your external genitalia look or to change how your hormones are produced. That has not been an advocate. It's all supposed to be done chemically. Now, again, just to emphasize that these regulations only apply to the term legally female or intersex individuals. So if they identify as female, this applies, and they have XY chromosome, this applies to them. They have, so the male chromosomes XY, they have testicles and not ovaries, and their circulating testosterone levels are within the normal male ranges. And their androgen receptors are functional, and that makes them able to utilize the increased testosterone level. And that's one of the big difference between males and females. The androgen receptors cannot utilize receptors, androgen receptors cannot utilize testosterone as an XY individual. Now, when CAS reviewed the case went before CAS and everything, CAS came out with this rule, you can look it up, it's easily available online. Now, the CAS, the Court for Arbitration for Sport, and that's rule in 5794 on April 30, 2019, the panel found that the DSD regulations that they are discriminatory. So they didn't deny this. But on the basis of the evidence that was submitted by the parties, which is all the stuff that I just went through in terms of the pros and cons of high testosterone levels and the ability to use it, in order to maintain a balanced playing field, it was necessary to regulate the level of testosterone in XY individuals in order to make it more competitive for them to be able to make it more balanced for XX individuals to compete against them. And so it is really designed to protect the XX class of female athletes who cannot, even if they had it, they could not utilize the testosterone as well as the XY females. And that is why CAS has upheld this regulation for over time. And you see a lot of back and forth in the news and back and forth by all kinds of doctors. The Medical Association of America had come up with some statement about this and that and fairness and etc. and about it not being fair and trying to throw a rule. But the facts remain that an XY female can compete at a higher level than an XX female because her cells can utilize androgens just like a man can. And if you look at all sports, and look at the levels, like you look at the track and field and the marks achieved, I'll use like a power event like the throws. Women throw the same implement from high school to Olympics. Boys throw increasing weights from the age 13, 14 up to adult life. So the weights for boys increase during puberty, and also the distances increase, and the distances increase proportionately so that the male records are high still with heavier implements are higher than the female records. The XY records are higher than females with heavier weights, and the women with XX, their records have increased with the same weight from high school or so forth, but it's still, the male records are still higher, and that even though you might argue the science, the clinical or the life examples are there to prove it. If you look at cricket, the female boundaries are closer than the male boundaries. You look at basketball, you don't find women in the NBA dunking and jumping over people's heads and so forth as you do in the male side. That all boils down back to the ability to utilize testosterone to get that lean muscle mass to give you all that power and so forth you need. So what this has led to individuals like Semenya, Nissan Nayon Saba of Burundi and Wambui of Kenya being asked to restrict their testosterone levels below a certain level to order them to compete. They don't come straight out and say that these women are XY women, but the fact that the rules that have been laid down of disorders of sex differentiate and goes to them, it would suggest that they are XY females, and as a result, they have the ability to, their bodies have the ability to utilize testosterone just as well as men. They have testosterone levels just as much as the average male does. And this is a graphic that I use to show you what this kind of boils down to. So in the 2016 Olympics, the 3 women that were allowed to compete at the time based on the rules and regulation, they won all the medals. This is the podium in the 2016 Olympics. Semenya ran 1:55.28. Wambui 1:56.49, and the Burundi athlete whose name always gives me problems, she ran 1:56.89. So come World Championships 2019, when the rules now were in place, and none of these women competed, and these are the women who won. So these are the XX women who won. And notice that there is about there's a 3-second difference between the winner and the winner here. And none of the women here, none of the XX individuals here would have been able to have made the XY podium in 2016. Okay, and this is kind of what happens. And then if you know where this is coming from, undocumented case. So this is Harmila Kratochvilova. She was a Czech athlete. So this is when the Czech Republic existed, which no longer exists. And I forget if it had become Bosnia or Serbia or whichever one. So this created a lot of controversy at the time, but it was just a lot of talk. Nothing was ever done. She has probably the most impressive series of events from 200 up to 800 meters. And those times there would still medal on a global stage in this day and age. Her 800-meter world record is still in place, 1:53.28. She still has, I think, the second fastest time in the 400 meters of all time, next to Marita Koch, who was from Eastern Germany, which has another story attached to it, of 47.9. And then she could run at 200 meters in under 22 seconds as well. Her features are debatable. I don't have heard, it has never been disclosed what her genetics were, but phenotypically, based on her musculature, if you look at the development of, let's look at her quads and her vastus medialis and lateralis and her intermedius, development there are quite masculine, and this created a lot of controversy at the time. But this is the world record in 800 meters that women have been chasing, and no one has come close. Like I said, her genetics is not known. But nothing about the science. A lot of this story was kind of buried or swept over the counter. People just assumed that all women from this side of the world, this is how they looked and so forth. But we later realized that women from this side of the world went on to win Miss Universe and Miss World and so forth, and they looked quite different from this. So in summary, testosterone and its derivatives are identified as the main differences between male and female performance in certain events. I say between 400 and 1500 meters, but I'd argue that it extends beyond this. Now, only female athletes with androgen receptors that can utilize elevated testosterone levels are implicated. So these are quote unquote XY females. The original value put forward by the IWF back in the day was 5 nanomoles, but since this year, the World Athletics has cut this value to 2.5, but all other rules stay in place about the 6-month period of keeping it below that level, and other such things. And that's the background of the whole thing. So we're open to questions and discussions. So those are the facts. I guess regardless of how you feel about this emotionally and otherwise, try to look at the facts and argue along those lines. And so when you're talking about females, we have to determine if they're XY or XX, and then decide what you think in terms of should they be allowed. And the example used earlier, what I showed was actually we talk about swimming. It's a big issue in swimming, because this is one of the transgender females who came in and destroyed all his records in females. She was only beaten by another transgender female from another university. So another XY female was the only female, quote unquote, that was able to beat her. And this track and field has made a bold step to come forward and insist for fair competition. We need to do these things. In America, where a lot of things, political correctness and so forth comes in, XY females have been allowed to compete with XX females. And if those of you who follow the mixed martial arts sports, there was an XY female who fought, had a couple fights with a couple XX females, and the results were devastating. I think one, she quote unquote broke somebody's jaw, and some other serious injuries took place to the other female that quote unquote she was involved in. So yeah, you identify one way, but your body allows you to behave the other way. It's similar. The example I think of sometimes like in car racing back in the day, for those who can remember, is have these Ford Escorts and the Ford Capri, and the guys used to change out the engines under these cars and challenge people in other vehicles on the road. It's before highways and so forth. And you know, people in BMWs are taking on these Ford Capris with these engines under there, and be totally embarrassed by these quote unquote under these cars that didn't look like they had any souped up performance out of them, because the whole engine was different. And that's kind of one of the ways you can look at this thing. All right, any questions? Or
Yes.
any points for discussion?
There is a question from Dr. Winston Dawes. Is there a position on transgender women and the concept of giving puberty blockers to children?
So that's a lot of that is very debatable, and what you found, so like individuals that have congenital adrenal hyperplasia and different defects on the genitalia at birth, they talk about the family and so forth choosing for them what, if they're XY or XX, choosing for them what gender they should be, and then doing surgery to remove whether it's the testes, if it's an XY female, and that's usually the case. So there is a lot of debate and discussion about that. Some of it is not so much in just in sport, but in just in the regular world now for transgender and the kids who want to identify as being female from before puberty, being allowed to take these puberty blockers and support to maintain their female type features or to make them more feminine. And this is before they reach the age of consent and so forth. And that has created a lot of debate and controversy, especially like in development, especially in the States where this is a huge ongoing debate, and whether the children of age enough have understanding enough to recognize the consequences of their actions long term. Because a lot of them, when they hit puberty and the whole androgenizing effects of their XY makeup kicks in, their constitution changes. And if I recognize a lot of these XY females who want to compete as women, the majority that I have seen in sport end up marrying XX women, you know? So there is a lot of debate, a lot of controversy about it. I think a lot of the conservative states, that's a definite no-no. I think it might be only the more liberal states that might allow for underage kids, pre-pubertal kids, that these kids are under age of consent, that allows them to take blockers to block the androgenizing effects of testosterone at puberty. So yeah, that's it's not universal, but yes, it's an issue. It's allowed some places. I think most places not, and that has a lot to do with the whole we don't fully understand and fully appreciate the long-term effects of doing all of this in someone so young. It's one thing when they reach an age and they can make a more informed decision, but when they're young, it's hard to know how they will turn out when they hit puberty.
Dr. Hamilton has his hand up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes. Well
done there, Scott.
Huh?
Are you in Florida?
Yeah, I'm back in Florida, my brother. I'm back in the parish of Miami, I should say. and I hope this is not, I don't want to speak ill or get myself in any trouble, but we have some people in this state that are very, very confused. But I really enjoyed your presentation a lot because, one, when we were finishing the PhD, this is so long ago, I'm aging myself, homosexuality was looked at as a mental disorder. And I remember a professor
he actually had his bachelor's degree from Harvard, but he would always tell you that he's from Harvard. This time, never getting a doctorate from Harvard. But that's beside the point. He would say, a lot of people say gay people choose to be gay, right? But he made the point that a hermaphrodite born with both sex organs didn't choose that. And in a lot of your slides, you have, he even said it a while ago, an XX female marrying an XY female. That example you gave of the long-standing 800-meter world record, that looks like an XY female to me. And it looks like XX females are trying to break world records that XY females, or in some people's cases, are what they would call them young men. I don't know. Yeah, because if you can androgenize the testosterone, as you said, right? XX female cannot do that. So a lot needs to be understood about the difference between the X and the Y, and the difference in you having a penis, you know, and whether just because you have the penis, or it could be a large clitoris. There's a whole lot to the argument, but I'm glad for your presentation. And this area is not clear to a lot of people. It's as if you would have to go in, give this presentation to a lot of people for them to really, really understand what's about to come down the pipe, you know?
Yeah, people get very emotional about it, you know? Because if you look in the papers, you pull up the topic, and think you have a lot of people, all of our local ethicists had written in one of the newspapers about it being unfair, about them having to take these hormone blockers and it's not right, and then quoting some medical this and that and the other. And then fair to whom? I mean, like, you have to look at the bare obvious fact. Is it fair for someone who can use testosterone like a man to compete with women?
Mm-hmm.
So is it fair for somebody to compete with somebody who's X and doesn't have the same advantage? And for those the XY females who have been allowed to compete with XX females over the years, it shows there's dominance. You know, I think one of the female swimmers, the XY female swimmers, was a mediocre male swimmer before they became a phenomenal female swimmer.
Exactly.
You know?
As a matter of fact, he lost everything as a male swimmer, changed to a female swimmer, and dominated. Hence their argument. You know. So yeah, it's just like Barry Bonds and them, man. When they were taking their steroids, it would be the equivalent. So you're a normal male, and then you competing against these super males based on the things that them pumping into them system.
Coach Alvon would like to put his inputs here, and then we'll have Mrs. Brown.
Coach?
Alvarenga? Okay, Mrs. Brown, you can go ahead.
What I'd like to know is whether the XY females have to disclose that when they are entering the competition. If they're going Olympics, do they have to disclose? If they're going World Champs, do they have to disclose on registration, or don't they? Because my thought is, why can't XY females disclose in a race by themselves?
So the short answer to your question is yes. And that's what came out of all of these disorders of sexual differentiation cases, and why certain individuals have disappeared from certain events in track and field. So that means that their genetics has to be known. That's the whole issue, with gene manipulation therapy and so on, all these things being banned by WADA and so forth. So yes, they have to disclose. So, but it's not made not to the general public, but to the powers that be that need to know these things. They have to know. But the powers that be, don't make it known to everybody else, you know, because that becomes become a medical legal issue. That's why I said, so you haven't heard anybody come out and say directly that these individuals are X, Y, and blah, blah, blah. You've never heard that being said. If you look at it, it just states the rules, the unfair advantages, and then whichever individual when the stone is thrown into the pen of individuals, whoever is hit is the ones that back out and withdraw from competition. So yes, they have to disclose. And I think that where it is going, and I push 2 points, where it is going is that XY females would have to be placed in their own category and compete against themselves. Because like I said, the old individual who beat this swimmer here was another XY female from another university. That's all the individual that was able to beat this transgender swimmer. And then what you have to look at now as well, what might happen over time as the world evolves and Gen Zs become Gens whatever, is that you recognize that the range of testosterone is highly varied in males. You know, it's high in younger males and it falls as you get older. Will there become a point when you have like how you have Formula 1 categories and so forth amongst men, and these are XY men, where we'll be placed in categories based on our testosterone levels? So you have the guys with the very high levels competing in one class, then you have the class with the average level, and you have the class with the low level, you know? Will it become a point where a male who is XY and his testosterone levels are on the lower end of the spectrum starts to female dog about the fact that another individual has a significantly higher level of testosterone that has an unfair advantage, you know? So the debate can extend into that level, and therefore now you start to have categories of XY men. Are you a 0.82 to 5 male, or a 5 to 10 male, or a 10 to 15 male? You know, that might be an extension of this down the road, but for now, it's really just focused on XY females versus XX females. And so, yeah, they do have to disclose to the powers that be, though. They do have to make it public to John, Jane, and their public friends.
Doc, I really appreciate that because even me in coaching swimming, if you look at the 9, 10, and the 11, 12 girls record, they're faster than the boys. And you explained it right there, you know, for swimming alone. Then after 13, 14, it changes and the girls no longer can see the wake of the boys' water.
Little girls can't kick little boys, you know what?
Not so after age 12, 13.
No. What people think, the playing field balances out and it takes off. But yeah, but that's why it's separating little girls and little boys in sports at that time. That's a major issue. That's why when you have little girls who are playing sports with little boys and you have people who get all uptight and so forth, it really not a big difference. I think little girls play skins and shirts.
Talking about in the normal scheme of things, not no
that age, they're pretty much balanced, and their mindset and a lot of things are pretty similar, you know. And to a lot of extent, the girls are outperforming the boys physically at that age.
I've seen girls beat boys at that age in arm wrestling.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen girls beat up boys of good fist action at that age as well.
I was actually a victim of that, but she snuck up on me. I didn't see her.
Hush, boss, hush.
Are there any other questions? Any comments?
Yes, one question. We're going to be able to get all of these PowerPoints just.
Well,
I'll share mine with you, Jody, and you can disseminate them to whomever.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we post the video of this keeping pace on our YouTube page, you know.
On the YouTube, yes.
Keeping pace sessions. with the PowerPoint presentations. In the video presentations are available on our YouTube page. So if you ever want to go back and review it in live action or recorded action, you can check the YouTube page for it. But otherwise, the presentations will become made available through the association if you so choose or so request.
All right, thank you.
Lovely presentation, everyone. Thanks for the discussion. And if there are no more questions, let me check the chat for a second. Anyone? No more? Then I'll invite Terry to do the closing remarks and vote of thanks.
Good evening, everyone. All right, I will begin by asking a serious question, right? How many persons know how to swim? And I don't mean splash around or doggy paddle. I mean, you can at least do one stroke properly. Because often we hear that we live in the Caribbean or we live in Jamaica with rivers and sea, and enough people don't know how to swim. So how
myself don't count, Terry.
Yes?
Tell them that I can help myself don't count either.
I can help myself. The splashing just to keep your head above the water? No, swim, swim. All right. Next question. This might age some of you guys, and I don't know if Kingston persons do this, but how many persons learn to swim in a canal or a river? How many persons grew up swimming in the canal or the river? All right, I'm seeing some hands raised. Dr. Jones, your school had
a top swimmer. He got his certificate in lifeguard training from the age of 13.
I used to swim for a while, you know, back in the day. So yes, I can do a little more than help myself.
Don't be so modest.
I've been around.
All right. I want to thank Coach Alvaranga for his presentation. While swimming is my favorite stroke, my favorite sport, I know that your detailed presentation focusing on the proper techniques for the different strokes would have definitely benefited me. Personally, and remind any athlete present and also benefit the medics that are here. JASM often focuses on track and field, football, and other land sports, but I'm sure not everyone is engaged in swimming and aquatic sports, but by sharing your experience, it has definitely expanded the knowledge of our practitioners. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Brown. Her presentation was well-researched and packed with illustrations of various injuries in swimming and injury management. It surely benefits the swimmers, the coaches, the parents, and the medics here. So thank you. Dr. Chin, you provided a great presentation on cross-training, fitness, and the benefits for athletes. You gave us a quality-filled, succinct presentation, which we all appreciated. And to our last-minute super presenter, we want to thank you for being reliable and available, Dr. Jones. The discussion you led was relevant, and I'm sure everybody has a greater understanding of this popular issue or topic that's going around in the sports field and in, of course, our general society, right? Diallo, I want to thank you, our technical and IT support, Jodian and the JASM team, education committee team. You always put on a good keeping pace. The discussion has, as always, was very interactive. It's a wonderful thing when persons from different backgrounds and experiences can come together and share their knowledge. It aids in growing our profession, our country, and aids us regionally, as we have persons here from Guyana, New York, Cayman, Trinidad, and I saw the UK also. We have parents, coaches, students here, and athletes. We
St.
have
Lucia also.
Yes.
St. Lucia was in the house as well.
Oh, St. Lucia also. That's good. We had 74 participants this Sunday, and I'd like to thank you all for your time and your support. Right? JSM and its various branches, Central, Western, the Eastern main branch. I believe that you guys have been really contributing to regional education and local education and integration, and I'm sure everybody appreciates it. So thank you all for coming, and enjoy your Sunday, the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Just a reminder before everyone goes, for those who are not members and would like to CEUs, payments can be made by direct transfer to the account. It's posted in the chat. And the emails to which you should email the proof of payment is also posted. So you can check that and you can pay for your CEUs. There were 3 that were approved. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
I'll,
Thank you so much.
I'll keep the meeting open for those to get the payment information. Is there in the chat?
All right, Diallo, we did it already.
Can we, even though some first have left, can we just quickly turn on our videos so that we could